Thanks for tuning in to the HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda. The HR Uprising is focused on helping forward-thinking people professionals deliver real lasting value in their organisations. I'm a chartered psychologist, speaker and trainer, and recently authored the best-selling business book, How to Be a Change Superhero. My day job is founder and CEO of software and training business Actus. This gives me the opportunity to work with other businesses like yours. We are focused on building a better workplace for people wherever they are located, with the help of our performance, learning and talent management software and our training and consultancy services. Every week on the podcast, I will be covering different topics and challenges, joined by relevant experts and real-life people professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy and get value from this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda, as ever, and this week I'm talking to Georgi Toma, and she's all the way over in New Zealand in the future. It's evening for her and it's morning for me. And she's a Romanian in New Zealand. In fact, in a moment I'll get you to explain how you've your journey, because it's quite interesting talking off camera earlier, Georgi. And what we're going to talk about here is your research and your business, which is all about well-being, and that originates from some personal experiences, and it's highly practical takeaways for HR professionals. So I'm really looking forward to understanding more. Morning, Georgi, or afternoon to you.
Hi, Lucinda. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. I'm a fan of the podcast, and I'm so happy and honored to be here talking to you and to your audience.
Well, we're delighted to have you, Georgi, and really it's really great to be branching out over to the COVID-free, as far as I understand it, New Zealand and Australia with envy. So tell us a little bit about, we started out, I sort of said, how you've ended up in New Zealand, because you've quite well travelled, and it links very much to your academic career to date, I guess, doesn't it?
Yes, my academic career took me from Romania to the States, where I did a master's, and then a brief stint in Spain, and a longer one in Australia, where I did my first PhD, and now here in Auckland, where I'm doing my second PhD, and I'm also working on starting my own company in the area of well-being. So my research has always been connected to well-being, and as I mentioned to you earlier, the reason was, well, first of all, I was interested in neuroscience and psychology. The human mind has always fascinated me. Particularly, it started around this idea that two different people can have completely different interpretations of the same event. And it started from when I was younger. I lived through the revolution in my country, and it was interesting to me to see the accounts that different people had of that event. And more than anything, it continued following the path of mental health, because as I talked to you earlier, I myself had struggled with anxiety most of my life, and particularly when I was working in Australia, I was working in a management role and doing my PhD full time. So that meant that I was working most weekends. I would have around 60-hour work weeks and intense KPIs that I had to perform to.
Was it a sales role, did you say? Business development was a sales role,
yeah.
Wasn't it? Because they're
yes. I was working
quite
in
mentally demanding.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was in the university environment. So I was working at the University of Sydney. So it was still education, which has always been a passion, but nonetheless, very demanding. And I'm sure anyone that works in an organization, either HR or in a position to manage people, understands the demands of supporting them, particularly now after having gone through a pandemic. So at the time, for me, what was interesting to see was that I allowed myself to ignore the messages that my body and my brain were sending me with regards to workload, with regards to really not creating time for me to recharge, and really not understanding what worked for me personally in terms of recharging. So there was a lot of unknown there.
Do you not
And
think you needed to? Do you just kind of think I can just carry on? So you were aware
yeah.
that you just thought I'll be fine?
Both. I was aware. I was
Yeah.
aware. I was already, like, I had been a meditation practitioner for many years, and I was practicing at that time. I just thought I could just push myself. I just thought I could do it. And there were certain elements around certain beliefs I was holding that I was not aware of, that really did not allow me to get a clear perception of my own reality, of where I was heading to. And so that stress kind of got accumulated, became chronic, and ignoring it and ignoring my symptoms of anxiety allowed for burnout and depression to develop. And then it allowed for them to get worse over years. So we're talking here in the span of about 4 years, I got to a state of suicidal depression. And I sought help. Luckily, the organization I was working for had an EAP program. I sought help. And while it is very helpful to talk to someone, particularly when you are in that situation, I didn't get tools that would help me really change the way my brain was creating the conditions for suffering in my life, the way my brain was interpreting elements in my outer reality, and the way my brain and body was reacting to stress, which now in hindsight, I have learned to recognize and to change. So I remember one particular morning, and this was a changing point in my life. It was waking up in the morning and thinking about ending it all. That's the first thought in the day. It's just so, I can't think of this day ahead. I can't think of starting it. And so I remember saying to myself, okay, this has got to stop. Like this can't go on. You got to make a decision. So you act on that or not. But if it's not, you got to change. So end it all or change it all. But like, stop this thinking, really.
So it's still quite resourceful. You're still quite resourceful to actually be that practical in that point when you're having suicidal thoughts and you're depressed.
That I think I'm not sure where it's come from, but it's helped me, guide me. That I'm a very practical human being, and probably I have to thank my family for that. I've always been very actually independent, so they encouraged me to just really look after myself, sort my own problems. Mm-hmm. So I guess that has helped. And in that moment, I got the inspiration, and I can't tell you where from is those moments of inspiration, really. And I said to myself, okay, I'm going to give you 90 days. And in these 90 days, you got to do 4 things. You got to do brain training, creativity training, meditation, and physical exercise. And after those 90 days, you're going to make a decision. And
you're actually saying you're going to make a decision whether to live or die. Is that what you're inferring?
Yeah, that was what it was. It was like, and then you're going to act on it. Like there was no excuse anymore. And so I remember I had the system of Post-its. You know, I put a Post-it every day on my fridge. It would be like day 1, the 4 items and a tick next to each. Day 2, day 14, day 20. And I started to notice that things were changing in the way I started to perceive reality, in the way I started to understand that I was making myself a victim, that I was giving my power away to external circumstances, that I was overreacting. And the days went past, and I started to notice that my behavior changed and my outer circumstances changed. So by the end of the 90 days, I was a completely different human being. And on the outer, you know, the biggest thing was I quit my job. I was on the pathway to permanent residence in Australia at that stage. And I really wanted to stay in Australia because I love the country. I love the people, the culture, the sunny weather. But I realized in that particular role, I was not aligned with my purpose. I was not living my best self. And I realized that I needed to leave. And that was the end of it. So I quit my job. I actually went to China for 3 months to study Tai Chi. And then I moved to New Zealand. The Wellbeing protocol was being created. Those 4 elements were the basis of it. But then I went on and I refined the techniques. I refined the research, and then I actually started doing research on it because I wanted to see if it works for other people as well.
Yeah.
And we've got the research results, and so we've worked with teachers during COVID-19. We were incredibly, I guess, blessed to have this. The study was set up. COVID-19 hit, and we were able to support people right through as they were going through the crisis. So we measured their levels of stress, burnout, and well-being using standard instruments in psychology research. We measured their levels before the program and after the program. And we saw a 50% reduction in stress, 40% reduction in burnout, and 45% improvement in well-being. This is while going through a global pandemic. Like having been us, we all went to lockdown. We started the program and then we had to go through lockdown, right? Teachers had to start adapting to teaching online. Then we went back into lockdown. Auckland had more lockdowns than New Zealand overall. And so throughout all of that happened in 2020, we were able to support people and to get those results. So I am absolutely grateful and happy to have had this opportunity.
So let me understand those a little bit more, because there's so much stuff that I'd like to just go deep into.
Yeah,
so first of all, for the benefit of the listeners, let's go through the four elements to your post-its, your protocol, because there was exercises, meditation. What were the 4 elements that you did every day?
The 4 elements were brain training, creativity training, meditation, and physical exercise.
So what's brain training?
Yes.
Like a Sudoku or a crossword or something? Or what would brain training be?
Yeah. So it yes, I understand it works like that. So in my initial sorry, I'm going to go back, just pulling back a little bit. It has to do more with neuroscience, and it has to do with understanding, first of all, you are rewiring your brain, to put it simply. So first, it's a process whereby you identify what beliefs you hold that are not serving you, and then you are rewiring your brain. So it involves mindset work, but it also involves, for example, training your brain to rest, brain rest practices. And so, for example, as I mentioned to you before, I had been a meditation practitioner for many, many years, and yet I still got to the point of being so depressed and being so burnt out. So there was an understanding around what meditation was and how to really practice it that was missing, and how to practice it in a Western context, not in a monastery, but in a context of a human being that is driven, wants to be their best self at work, in the personal life as well. It has commitments, right? And how do we practice that? So that understanding was missing at that time. And I had to, first of all, experience for myself certain truths and then supplement with further research to understand how the mechanisms work. So now the Wellbeing protocol is in a much polished way.
So it's repeatable. You could tell, you were obviously working out how to do it, but if you could, obviously you're taking it to HR people, you could get regular people to understand how to do it. So
yes, the program is already polished. So there's several stages that we're following, and we're starting by redesigning the way our brain and body responds to stress. That is absolutely key. And then we are working with developing a set of resources. So let me explain a little bit. One of the key ways in which we work in the Wellbeing protocol is first and foremost, everything we teach is based in research. So one of the definitions of well-being, for a long time, well-being as a term in the research community was highly debatable. Researchers didn't get to an understanding of what is well-being. And so what we teach in the well-being protocol is a new approach, which I believe is very important in the sense that Dr. Ruth Dodge and her team, they define well-being as the point of balance between the challenges that come our way and the resources we have to meet those challenges. And so it's very important to keep in mind three important aspects to this definition. One is that there's an intrinsic need for homeostasis in all human beings. So when we talk about concepts such as happiness, for example, we know that there's kind of like a set happiness point. And we know there's studies that show that someone who's won the lottery and someone who's been in a car accident and is paralyzed as a result, after a certain amount of time, reach the same level of happiness, the set point, right? So
for them, presumably, not as each other necessarily. Is it happiness for yourself? Yeah.
Yes. So what it's important to keep in mind is that well-being is the same, right? So we have kind of like a set point, and we tend to gravitate towards balance. And this is actually incredibly empowering, because that means that no matter what comes our way, our natural tendency is to find that balance, is to find the resources within. So the well-being protocol supplements that natural tendency and gives people very simple, concrete tools to build those resources.
Does that mean that you can naturally you can increase your level of well-being though? Because otherwise you could almost feel like you're stuck at a certain level. And the reason I mention that is I want to go back to your earlier point where you said how different people react differently to the same circumstances. Yeah. Which and I've spoken about my sister before on this podcast in terms of well-being, and she has had struggles with anxiety, and not that long ago we had a conversation about my mother, who's no longer with us. She actually ended up with early onset dementia, which may have been related to this, but she had no sense of time. So she picked us both. She was permanently late, both of us, and we picked up from the train station very, very late, hours late. No, I'd be waiting for an hour. My sister was younger than me. I think it was slightly worse for her, but my sister internalized that. So that lateness, I only realized in the last few years that my sister thought that therefore meant she was unloved, or it was about her. I thought it was about my mother. I thought it was my mother's problem. And I thought we both are having that same circumstance, both the same, DNA, but interpreting it in a different way. And then she's not on to have more sort of anxiety. That said, I've also had experiences where when I was just left university with sort of suicidal thoughts and things, and that was about circumstances. I changed circumstances and I was okay. But I'm interested in that aspect of it in terms of, can you therefore, if you are somebody who's got, let's say, has more of a tendency to be a bit more anxious, can you find a way to increase your, you don't always want to be fighting against your own homeostasis. You'd like to have a more relaxed way of being.
Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. And it's not about sorry,
is this what this does? Hopefully.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not about necessarily building towards something. It's rather about removing a block. So let me explain how it works. I'm just to use this example, right, with your sister. When you examine certain beliefs, when you're able to see that certain beliefs, such as, for example, I am not good enough, which I can tell you 99% of the people that I've worked with, if not 100% of the people that I've worked with, hold this belief at a subconscious level. And it is triggered by some event in our earlier years that we have misinterpreted, right? Now, we have certain exercises that help people understand or see for the first time how this belief actually influences these goggles that they put on. So the way we look at the world, all of us, is not an unmediated perception of reality, not at all. It is actually, reality is constructed, and it is constructed by the brain. And brilliant work, for example, from people like Dr. Anil Seth at the University of Sussex at the Center for Cognitive Neuroscience. Brilliant work. And so he's showing us how our brain constructs reality, how our brain predicts ourselves into being. Very interesting. So basically, the way the brain does this is by utilizing those framework of reference it has established when we were younger. And some of those framework of reference are good. Like, we don't want to touch a hot stove every time to learn that that's dangerous. No, we want to do it once, we'll learn, right? But other framework of reference, such as, I am not good enough because we always give an explanation, right? My mom is late because I did something wrong, or there's something wrong with me, right? So when we learn to identify that framework, we also learn to observe how it influences our perception of reality. And then the next step is we train our brain to remove that framework.
So this is your brain training, is it?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, that is part of that. Yes. And in the Wellbeing protocol, we talk about the zone of power. So what is the zone of power? This is the zone where we have agency. And this for me was the biggest wake-up moment. If you remember in my story, one of my biggest realizations was that I was making myself a victim, right? I was saying, well, I am stressed because my boss is so-and-so. I am stressed because I have all this work to do and I cannot say no. And who holds the power in that situation? Well, it's my boss, or it's my workload, right? It's all those external things I have no control over. So when you operate from a belief that this external circumstance is what it's causing you stress, or what it's causing you to feel unwell, you are giving your power away, period. So the most important work, first and foremost, is to move into your zone of power, to reclaim power. And the question is very simple. What do you have control over? So you can't control outside circumstances. You never will. You are never able to control other people, what they say, what they do. You can't. You can't control the weather. So saying, oh, I'm happy when it's sunny and I'm sad when it's rainy is the biggest giveaway of power, right? To an uncontrollable natural phenomena, right? So moving into your zone of power and improving your well-being starts by taking 100% responsibility, right? What is within your control? First and foremost is the thoughts that you choose to pursue. And here I'm very specific about not saying your thoughts, because actually we cannot control our thoughts. They are natural phenomena, and scientists are still trying to explain really how are thoughts born, right? What originates thoughts? What originates consciousness? We still don't know that. It's a mystery, right? But we do know that you can't control them. And I can demonstrate very simply. Do not think of a monkey on a tricycle, right? But what comes to your mind, right? It's the main image of the monkey, right?
Yeah,
some image of a monkey.
The knot, can we?
Exactly. So we can't control our thoughts. And if anyone has ever tried to stop their thoughts, would know that that's just futile. It leads to more and more thoughts.
Can you train your thoughts? Do you think can you train yourself to have more positive thoughts? If you have a tendency of negative thoughts, can you train?
Yes. And I want to just a little bit explain this statement, because I think there's a danger of believing that positive thinking is the solution to everything. And there's a lot of advice out there that I think actually contributes to, that is actually detrimental. Because it's not about becoming a Pollyanna, and it's not about lying to yourself. Oh, I'm okay. Let's do this affirmation for 20 times a day. like in Seinfeld, serenity now, insanity later, right? It's not that. But what you can do, what is very helpful, which is actually the essence of meditation when it's used as a tool, you are able to recognize when a thought arises. You can name it, oh, that's a worry thought, and then you let it go. And you move your attention towards what is real for you in this moment. Because there are ways in which we cause unnecessary stress and overwhelm for ourselves. And that is because we haven't been taught to practice very basic brain hygiene. So as we go through the course of the day, our brain becomes more and more stimulated, right? And it's like a toddler. If anyone's had a toddler, when they're very tired, they tend to have tantrums. They tend to cry. They're unconsolable, and they can't rest also. It's very hard for them to fall asleep.
Because they're overstimulated, yeah.
Exactly. So we need to learn to practice very simple and basic brain hygiene exercises. And one of the most simple ones is you need to take a break during the day where you simply learn to let go of your thoughts. And you can call it a meditation practice. That's fine. You can listen to an audio, but understand that the purpose of it is brain rest. So you engage in the practice of letting your thoughts go, coming back. What is real for me right now? Well, what's real is that I'm at my desk, but I'm taking a break. And it's so pleasant to just feel that I'm breathing, and that's all that's required of me in this life. My presence is enough, and I'm breathing perfectly well.
So do you see it needs to be a kind of a proper presence meditation, or do you see that there are things like I kind of think of active relaxation, like some sports where you lose yourself in it, so you're at least not thinking of work, or if you are really engrossed in a podcast or something you're listening to, it is better than being on non-stop Zoom all day, right? It's still different, but I don't know whether it's recharging. What's your view on that?
I think the answer is yes. And one of the things that we work with in the Wellbeing protocol is an awareness that everyone has a personal way of recharging. So you have to discover for yourself. And so we go through different exercises where people try out different things. And you have to discover for yourself what it is that is recharging. So I can give you some examples. For me, I find it incredibly recharging to eat my lunch, focusing only on eating. So I make it a point, even if my lunch break is sometimes 15 minutes, I make a point of going outside of the office, or now that we're working at home, I'm going outside, or if I can't, I sit somewhere different from where I work. And all I do in that time, I look at this food and I express gratitude that I have it, and I just eat it. So those 15 minutes are incredibly recharging for me. Then around 3:00, when is a slump, I feel tired, I do a meditation, and sometimes it's just a 5-minute meditation. But for me, it's like a power nap. And I've heard from clients that have implemented that lunch thing, that it's incredibly powerful. A sport can be the same, right? Because you're just there in the moment, right? You're not thinking about the future, worrying about the past. You're in the moment.
And I think if you find it hard to just do the focusing on thing, then actually something where you're having to be in the moment like that, it makes it easier. Your brain can't really wander off because you're having to focus on whatever it is you're doing. But your lunch is such an interesting one. I must do that because it's so easy to sit there on your phone, isn't it?
Yeah.
And just not escaping at all.
Yes. And please, if you do anything, just don't do that. Like, just focus on the food. and thinking, this is the time for myself. It is important the words you say to yourself, because sometimes you do something like you go for a walk, right? And I caught myself the other day and I said, Georgie, you don't practice what you preach. But I went for a walk, right? And I realized my mind was going off stuff about work or stuff that I still had to do when I came back home. And I said, hold on. No. This is my time for myself. It's a 10-minute walk, but it's my time for myself. I am honoring myself. So one of the important things is that you tell yourself, and you do it as well, that you find something to honor yourself every single day. And what do I mean by honor yourself? It could be as simple as today I'm going to take this 10-minute walk to enjoy the sun and be with myself, enjoy my presence. Or tonight I am going to, when I go into the shower, there's this shower gel that smells so nice, and I'm just going to take that moment to enjoy that smell and that moment of relaxation. So it doesn't have to be big. Self-care doesn't have to be big things. I'm going to go for a 1-hour massage, because sometimes you don't have the time. That's the reality, right?
Massage is one of the worst things for me. I could lie there thinking of work,
Yes. And I can relate to that. And when it happens to me, I just bring my attention back into my body. I literally move the attention away to that part of the body. And really, that's the secret to coming back to the present moment, right? We hear, if anyone has done mindfulness training or meditation training, you've heard this idea, be in the present. And for many years, I was like, what does that mean? I'm here. Yeah. Hello? Where am I? I'm not, exactly. What does that mean? And so I found that for me, what works is coming back into your body. So focusing, what do the clothes feel like on my skin? What sensations am I feeling now in my body? Is there any tension somewhere? And then what feels good in my body? And sometimes even a question like, what does my knee feel like? Oh, knee. Okay. What feels pleasant? Oh, my elbow is happy now. You know what I mean? So it's like coming back into sensations in the body. And then the question, what is real for me right now? So what is real for me, for example, is that, I just have to write this one email. So I don't have to think about the following email or the meeting that's coming up in 50 minutes. No, now I do one thing.
Okay, so it's almost, what's the priority? What's the essential thing that needs to be done?
Yes, right, I mean, now. That's a part of it. That's part of it, prioritizing. But other than that is when you're engaged in a task,
just focus on that task. Don't be worrying about the one after it. I got you. So, right, going back, I'm conscious that this. We've got to keep. We'll get back on track because we've been chatting for a while, but I'm so interested in everything you're talking about. That's just on our 4 things. And you can tell us more about how they work. They fit into work. The one other one was creativity. What's that about? So we talked a bit about brain training. That's mindset work. What was the creative? Is that thinking of different ways of looking at the world or something? Or what's that?
Yes, at the very core of it, creativity is fueled by curiosity, right? And when we approach any kind of situation from a position of I'm curious about it, there's a certain openness that naturally happens to us. And so one of the key components, both to brain training and to kind of mindset rewiring, is curiosity. And why do I say this? Because sometimes we identify patterns of thought that don't serve us. And then we're like, oh, Georgie, how could you think that? Come on. So we tend to be quite critical of ourselves, some people more than others. But every human being that I've met has an inner critic. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we do, and it's a fun activity if you want to do it, is give your inner critic a name. So for example, my inner critic is the sergeant. And I know that the sergeant comes and the sergeant goes like, okay, so you got to do this and this and this and this today. No, keep pushing, go for it. So the sergeant, interestingly, for a long time has been perceived as having benefits, right? I mean, this I used to think that it helps me perform better, that it helps me achieve my objectives. But the truth is, when you replace that voice with kindness and curiosity, you become much more performant and much more relaxed. And so understanding that there's many ways to look at a situation. So creativity is about that, right? It's not one way. There are many ways. What other positions can I occupy? Right?
So choosing alternative frames of reference to look at a situation.
Even exploring them. You don't even have to make them as a choice, but just that exercise of exploration, you know? And there's I used to do this creativity exercise whereby, okay, you have a problem. Let's say, you have a conflict with your boss, and do this exercise. Take 3 famous people and ask yourself the question, what would this person do? So for example, what would Charlie Chaplin do? What would I don't know? I'm trying to think of a famous person right now, and I can't. What would Prince Harry do?
Yeah, I guess Boris Johnson. They're all people that I don't really want to choose their brain of the people that came to my head. Say for someone, Mother Teresa or somebody very tranquil, Gandhi.
But also like having fun. So fun is essential. And I used to be a person who would be like, okay, give me the ROI on fun. That was I'm very practical, kind of results-driven individual. And one of the biggest learnings from my own personal journey and also working with others was that fun and enjoyment are absolutely crucial, because you are in a state of flow. You are aligned when you are enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if for a long time, and if you've noticed in your life that there has been a long time when you did not feel a sense of enjoyment or fun, you need to stop and take stock. What's missing? What's not aligned? That's really crucial.
Yeah, gosh. Okay, so but you can't have forced fun. So you've got to be something that's fun to you. You've got to learn to do it.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's pull this together in terms of what people can do practically, because I think there's been lots of stuff about the practical stuff, and then let's go on to when you're working with HR professionals, practical steps that we can do, because we know that this is something that's big in the workplace. In terms of you've talked about. Do you want to just make the links for the person in terms of this as to what skills people can take on that? I mean, we've talked a bit about controlling what you can control, and your 4 points that were they the origin of your wellbeing protocol, or have you actually explained what the wellbeing? So that's your 4 steps to your wellbeing protocol, is it?
That was the origin.
That's the origin.
Right now,
do you want to translate that into what it means now?
Yes. So I guess on an individual level, what people can do right now to improve their well-being is, first and foremost, become aware of the thoughts they have. And just throughout your day, simply for a week, pay attention to the thoughts you have. If you have an opportunity, write them down. This is going to give you an insight into the kind of thoughts you have, because these thoughts will dictate how you feel and will dictate the level of emotional well-being, but also the level of stimulation that your brain is under. So if you find yourself having racing thoughts, being on hyperdrive for most of the day, take notice of that. The second thing that I would do is implement those breaks during the day, right? We talked about a very simple way. Have your lunch, even if it's a 15-minute lunch, away from stimulation. Just pay attention to the food, express gratitude for it. The third thing that you can do is you can start a meditation practice. There's many apps, there's many ways, but very simple way is, what does the breath feel like in my body? What does it feel like? Now, I think the final step that is incredibly powerful is, how do you feel in moments of silence when you are by yourself? Have you checked in with yourself? Do you enjoy your company? An encounter with silence. This is my challenge for you. Begin an encounter with silence, and it will naturally take you towards establishing the balance for you. That's a precursor, because you already have within you all the solutions to your challenges. You already have within you the resources. So it's about bringing those up. And silence is a very powerful precursor to that, right? Because it allows you to hear that voice within you that guides you towards balance.
Mm.
So on an organizational level, what we've seen from working with our clients and from working with HR specialists and well-being officers in the workplace, we've seen a couple of things following COVID. One of, I guess, the positive outcomes of this crisis have been the fact that there are more and more well-being conversations in the workplace. And that because people faced this tragedy together and were beginning to be more open about it, it kind of brought people together. And so that is a wonderful opportunity, particularly for HR specialists to start really a serious conversation with leadership about what represents well-being for employees and what are the priorities after COVID-19. And we've seen a lot of surveys coming up now. More recently, a McKinsey Global Institute report that shows that almost 50% of the workforce has burnout symptoms. So it is a reality that there is higher stress and burnout in workplaces. And it has to do with the fact that for many organizations, there's uncertainty around roles. There's uncertainty about moving to hybrid workspaces, uncertainty about really what the plans of the organizations are for the future, right? And so employees feel more stressed, feel more burnt out, and they want support. In fact, employees in that same report, they say, oh, we want our workplace to care more about our well-being. So there's an opportunity really for HR people to become the advocates of the people and really have significant influence on an organization's culture and create really cultures where people feel respected and supported to live better. And so one of my first recommendations is to get the pulse of an organization. So you start a conversation around what is really going on. And so anonymous surveys work, but more than anything, I would recommend focus groups or even one-to-one talks. But it's easier to gather more data in a focus group in a faster way. And the reason why I'm saying this, use surveys and use focus groups so that you have data that's both quantitative, so numbers, and qualitative. Yeah. And in terms of quantitative, I would recommend using some kind of psychological standard measurement. So you can say, look, in organization, we have this much stress, we have this much burnout. This is the scale of depression. This is the scale of anxiety. This is what's happening in an organization, right?
Are the tools, on that, if people wanted to do that, do they need to bring a psychologist in to do that, or are there metric tools you can recommend?
Like, for example, we offer that service. We set that up for ourselves. If they want to do it on by themselves, I think they would still need to get informed on how to actually
use some of these.
What are the tools. Measurements and how they're scored and. But that's not impossible. Like if someone wants to do that kind of research, they can do it.
But you're saying
right?
Use something that's referenced as a benchmark, really, to measure these things, and then you can do it before and after, which is what you were saying earlier with those figures that you got during the pandemic. You were using
exactly. Because there's a different conversation when you go to a leadership board and say, okay, look, this is it. We've used a valid instrument. These are the numbers. You got to pay attention.
Yeah.
Because if our employees are stressed and burnt out, the result is significant in terms of performance, in terms of turnover. Staff costs are the higher cost for a company. 90% of a company cost goes into staff-related costs, such as salary, turnover, all the training, so employee benefits. So there's a clear connection with return on investment when people invest in employee well-being. So I'd recommend they do that, and they build a business case. And there's a lot of reports now, increasingly so, on what is well-being in the workplace and what's the ROI. And then have a conversation with the leadership. That's very important, because we've seen, for example, in our clients, there's different levels of involvement. Some leaders are more open to start having a conversation at organizational level about well-being. They're more open to themselves being vulnerable, and some are not. And the reality is, it's got to start at the leadership level. And the reality is, interestingly, I think a lot of leaders, they want to do well, but they are afraid of starting a conversation about mental health because they don't know what to say. Okay, so I'm going to ask someone, how are you? And you're like, I really want to know how you are. And someone tells you, like I'm going through a divorce, or someone in my family is sick, and then you're like, oh my God, what do I say?
They don't know what to do with the information. Yeah.
Yes. And so what we help leaders, so we have specific training for leaders. It's like, but the very simple answer is this: you don't have to give them a solution. You don't have to give them an answer. In fact, it's better if you don't, because you're not qualified to do so. And you're not supposed to now get qualified as a psychologist or a therapist or a counselor. No, that's not your job. But all you need to do is listen and make that person heard.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Make that person heard. So they say, I hear you. That must be difficult. Have you thought, if you want support, this is the resources that we have. And so one of the things that we help leaders do is prepare. Actually, they should have resources for everything. Okay, if a person is dealing with domestic violence, this. If a person is dealing with bereavement, this. If a person is like that.
Yeah, so just give them some tools and things to support, and don't feel they've got to run away from it.
Yeah.
So Georgie, I think we're going to have to leave it there, but I could definitely sit and talk to you indefinitely. We're about to do a follow-up podcast. In terms of what you're doing, do you want to just share? We'll obviously get all of the links. I've got your links here and I'll put them in the show notes. But would you like to share a bit about how people can get to what your website is and how people can connect with you?
Yes, people can connect with me on LinkedIn, Georgi Toma. Our website is heartbrainworks.org. So our organization is called Heart and Brain Works. And we are passionate about helping people help their people.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So we work with organizations to create healthy cultures, and cultures where well-being is forefront. So we help leaders better support their team. And then we work with particularly leaders and HR specialists to understand where does mental well-being fall in the area of workplace health and safety, how to create a strategy around it that works, and how to actually make sure it is embedded in your organization, in your organization's culture in a very fun and engaging way.
Yeah.
And then we really provide the Wellbeing Protocol, which is a series of very simple, practical techniques that work in the area of prevention. You prevent before it escalates.
Absolutely.
And if we are dealing with cases that are already significant, we help reverse some of the symptoms. And if we're dealing with crisis, then we support, obviously, the work that's already there by EAP providers and psychologists and counselors.
And I noticed also there's some videos you've got here that people can access if they want to look at it.
Yes. I forgot to mention that. Yes, we are very happy to. We have a mini series, like 7 short and sweet videos that's called Stress No More. And it's free of access. People can get a taste of the kind of work we do around redesigning the way our brain and body responds to stress. And there's a link there, and people can register and watch the videos and start off on this journey.
Fantastic. Georgie, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the HR Uprising podcast. Your work sounds so interesting, and I think it's going to be a really valuable podcast episode for people. So I very much appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Lucinda. Thank you so much.
I really hope you found this week's episode useful and enjoyable. If you did, perhaps you could recommend us to a friend or colleague, or give us a review on your platform of choice. It really helps new listeners to find us. Now, you can access links to any of the information mentioned in this show via the website www.hruprising.com. Further free resources are also available at www.actus.co.uk. There you can also find out more about our software and training solutions. Finally, why not join our LinkedIn group, the HR Uprising, to share ideas and collaborate with other like-minded people professionals. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.